What happens when betrayal is delivered with a handshake? The conference room smelled like lemon-scented polish and false promises. Evelyn Hart stood across from Damian Cole, CEO of Nexora Systems, mentor turned stranger. He wore the kind of smile that looked rehearsed in mirrors, the kind meant to disarm, distract, dismiss. "Congratulations," he said, sliding a thick envelope across the table. "Your role here has concluded. We're restructuring." Her name wasn't on the envelope, but she knew exactly what was inside. A termination script, an NDA, a severance check disguised as a gift. Evelyn didn't flinch. She didn't ask why. She already knew. She set her company-issued laptop on the table, fingers calm. Then she looked him in the eye and said, "Good luck with tomorrow's investor demo." Damian blinked, just once, then smiled wider, always the professional. Security was waiting outside, 2 guards, one familiar, one new. Neither made eye contact as they escorted her down the corridor past labs she had designed, past conference rooms where her algorithms had made jaws drop. She walked slowly, deliberately, not because she needed time to think, because they needed time to regret. At the elevator, one of the guards cleared his throat. "Anything else you need to collect?" Evelyn shook her head. "No, I already brought everything I needed." The doors slid shut. As the elevator descended, she caught her reflection in the brushed metal wall, stoic, composed, unreadable. She stepped out into the gray California drizzle, heels clicking on wet pavement. Her coat flared behind her like a cape as she walked to her car. She didn't look back. In her coat pocket, her hand closed around a small, smooth object, a black USB drive. Sleek, unassuming. The original Oracle Net. Not the version they thought they owned, not the one on company servers, but the one that still answered only to her. She had spent 18 months building a miracle, and 6 months making sure they couldn't steal it. Genesis Lock was already embedded, waiting, unseen, unstoppable. By the time Damian would realize what he'd lost, she'd be 3 steps ahead. They thought they were terminating a contract. She was initiating a countdown. What happens when your mistake is the very thing they can't undo? 3 months earlier, Evelyn had noticed it. A flicker in the logs, a 2:17 a.m. access to the sandbox environment from an internal IP address not tied to her terminal, a failed permissions request, then another. At first, she chalked it up to dev-side hiccups, maybe a misfired cron job or an intern stumbling through the back end. But then the second week came, and then the third. The patterns didn't lie. Someone inside Nexora was trying to duplicate her core model without flagging the audit trail, and that's when Evelyn stopped fixing the bug and started feeding it. Every time they attempted unauthorized entry, she let them through just enough. She crafted a shadow version of Oracle Net 1 that looked complete on the surface, but was missing the critical failsafes. It performed well enough for demos, impressive enough to lure in investors, but it couldn't scale. And it couldn't think, because Evelyn had removed the heart, the adaptive correlation module code only she understood and only she could authenticate. She called it Genesis Lock. Privately, she'd embedded it into the real model, tethered to a biometric handshake and a triple key protocol that required voice retinal and keystroke patterns. Uncrackable unless you were her. Even Nexora's best engineers didn't know it existed. It wasn't in the documentation. It wasn't in the comments. It lived in the spaces between, in the whispered logic of someone who had spent 2 decades knowing when brilliance had to hide just to survive. One day she walked into the server room with a cup of coffee and a flash drive labeled HR onboarding. She slid it into the back of Node 12, waited 15 seconds, and walked out. Genesis Lock was live. From that moment forward, if they tried to deploy Oracle Net without her, it wouldn't crash, it would corrupt, quietly, fatally, elegantly. Investors would see delays, then anomalies, then junk, and no one would know where to begin fixing it because the code would still appear perfect. Back in the present, Evelyn sat at her kitchen table laptop, open rain tapping gently on the windows. Her finger hovered over the live log dashboard. She watched as Lean 438 flickered red. Unauthorized deployment active. Status Genesis lock triggered. Estimated disruption. T-Durozo 9. 5D8. She leaned back in her chair, sipped her tea, and whispered, "Showtime." What happens when the future they bragged about forgets how to function at precisely 10 a.m.? Nexora Systems opened the doors to their flagship demo suite. Rows of brushed steel chairs filled quickly with venture capitalists, defense consultants, and tech journalists from all over the world. A full camera crew was positioned in the back. Every guest had been carefully chosen, every screen meticulously positioned to impress. Damian Cole stood near the front Navy suit, sharp pocket square crisp. Behind him, a massive LED wall displayed a countdown OracleNet demo, begins in 60 seconds. He turned to the investors with a confident grin. What you're about to see will redefine infrastructure safety worldwide. The lights dimmed, a hush fell, and then chaos. The screen flickered once, then again. A red alert box pulsed at the center. Unauthorized operation detected seismic protocol mismatch. 14 threads out of sync. A low ripple of confusion spread across the room. Someone from IT darted in from the side and frantically started typing at the control panel. Meanwhile, the left monitor suddenly lit up with a series of wild predictions. 5.8 quake detected in Cleveland. Volcanic surge imminent in Kansas. Hurricane pattern forming near Denver. Gasps, laughter, and then silence. It wasn't funny anymore. A woman from a federal disaster agency leaned toward her colleague. "If this is a joke, it's a bad one," Damian tried to salvage the moment. "Looks like our system's pulling test data, just a reset glitch. 1 sec." He turned to his lead engineer, lips barely moving. "Fix it now." But the engineer's hands were already shaking. "We tried to reboot twice. The sandbox reverted to corrupted outputs. The fallback model is unreadable." Then came the final blow, Genesis, signature not found. System integrity score, 4%. Recommend shutdown. That phrase hadn't come from Evelyn's codebase. It had come from Evelyn herself, burned into the system like a signature. The board members started whispering. Phones lit up. One investor stood up and walked out. The room had gone cold. Damian's jaw clenched. Where the hell is Evelyn? No one answered. She was exactly where they had put her outside, but she had left behind something that couldn't be escorted out. Not her fingerprints, not her files. Her revenge was running on every screen in that room, and it was just getting started. What happens when all the noise dies and you're left with consequences? By 10:23 a.m., the Nexora demo had been officially labeled a technical misfire. By 10:30, the live stream link was dead. And by 10:45, Damian Cole sat alone in his corner office. Door shut, tie loosened, jaw set like stone as notifications piled up across his screen. Board message call emergency session. Investor Group A demanding a refund of deposit. FedTech liaison canceling follow-up discussion. Outside his glass walls, the usual hum of the office had dimmed to an eerie quiet. Key staff had scattered. PR had gone dark. Engineering was frozen, afraid to touch a single line of code without triggering more chaos. No one dared say it out loud, but everyone knew. They'd built a machine they didn't understand. And they'd fired the only person who did. Damian's fingers hovered over his keyboard. He started to type Evelyn's name into his contacts, then stopped. He didn't want to admit defeat. Not yet. Across town, Evelyn Hart stood in her modest kitchen, spooning cold soup into a chipped ceramic bowl. The TV was off. Her phone face down on the counter. But she could feel the silence stretching, spreading like spilled ink across Nexora's pristine floors. That silence wasn't nothing. It was acknowledgement. It was the first real respect they'd ever offered her. Her laptop pinged softly. She turned it over with one hand and read the single-line system alert. Genesis lock remains active. No access granted. She nodded once, then closed the lid. No victory dance, no smug text to a friend. Just a breath. Long, slow, controlled. Let them sit with it. Let Damien replay the moment the demo failed, again and again, wondering when exactly things had slipped from his grasp. Was it when he first promised her full autonomy and never meant it? Was it when he smiled during her termination? Or was it far earlier, when he saw brilliance as something to possess, not protect? It didn't matter now. What mattered was this. They'd underestimated her. They'd stripped her title. They'd revoked her badge. But they couldn't silence what she'd built. And now, in the quiet aftermath, Evelyn Hart had become something far more dangerous than disgruntled. She had become essential. What happens when the person you cast out walks back in, holding all the leverage? It was 7:12 the next morning when Evelyn stepped into Nexora's lobby. Same black blazer, same calm gait, but nothing about her arrival felt routine. The receptionist blinked, twice flustered. "Dr. Hart, I didn't know you were coming." "I know," Evelyn replied, stepping past the desk. "Where's Damien?" Before the woman could answer, Evelyn's badge, yes, still active, flashed green at the executive elevator. Someone had reinstated it overnight. Desperation made systems sloppy. She ascended in silence. On the top floor outside the war room, voices were already raised. "We cannot go public with this instability," a man shouted. "The system was sabotaged," someone else insisted. "Then maybe we shouldn't have fired the architect," came a third, colder voice. Evelyn didn't knock. She opened the door. 6 men in suits, 2 board members, Damien pacing like a shark in a puddle. The room froze. "Good morning," she said, as if walking into a staff meeting, not the scene of a technological car crash. Damien looked like he hadn't slept. "Evelyn, how did you badge still works?" she said, lifting it. "Might want to audit your systems." He motioned to the board. "We're in the middle of," I know she cut in, "a disaster. One I can fix." They waited. No one dared speak first. She stepped forward and placed a small black flash drive on the center of the table. Its matte casing looked insignificant, but every eye locked onto it like it was a detonator. "This is the patch, the real one. Genesis Lock's reversal protocol. You can demo within 24 hours, clean, stable, impressive." And what one of the board members asked, carefully, "Do you want in return?" Evelyn pulled a folded document from her bag and slid it forward. Co-founder title, 50% IP ownership, retroactive compensation, full creative control. Damien scoffed. "You're dreaming." "No," she said softly, "I'm remembering what you promised, before the lies." The room was silent, until the older board member cleared his throat. "We'll review." "No," Evelyn said, calm but firm. "You'll sign, or the patch walks with me." Damien's eyes flicked to the board, to the flash drive, then back to her. He knew. They all did. The woman they tried to erase had become the only one who could save them, and now she wasn't asking for a seat at the table. She was claiming the whole damn floor. What happens when the people who dismissed you now need your name to survive? The boardroom had never been this quiet. No arguments, no smug interruptions, just the soft scratch of pen on paper, one signature at a time. Damien's jaw tightened with every flick of ink. He looked like a man forced to drink salt water, necessary but bitter. Across the table, Evelyn sat motionless, her eyes steady but distant, as if the room no longer concerned her. And maybe it didn't, because she had already won. The document she slid forward contained more than just numbers. It was history rewritten her name, printed beside the words, Chief Systems Architect and Co-founder, ownership clauses, royalty protections, an amended press release with full attribution, no fine print, no buried footnotes. When the last page was signed, the lawyer cleared his throat. "It's official." Evelyn nodded once. Good. No celebration, no handshake, just reality adjusting to the new order. She stood and slipped the signed papers into her bag, carefully, deliberately, before turning to Damien. "I assume the investors are still expecting a new demo," she said. He swallowed. "They've rescheduled to Friday." She smiled. "Perfect. You'll have a fully functional system by Thursday afternoon." He looked down. "Is that a threat? It's a promise?" She replied, her voice silk over steel. "I don't sabotage systems. I safeguard them from people like you." The board members exchanged glances, some ashamed, others simply calculating. One of them, the only woman in the room, finally spoke. "Dr. Hart," she said carefully. "What made you put in the Genesis lock to begin with?" Evelyn paused, then answered without flinching. "Because I've spent 20 years watching good ideas get stolen, watching women get sidelined, watching vision traded for profit margins. I knew the day would come when someone would try to strip this project of its soul. I just didn't think it would be this soon." There was no rebuttal, only acknowledgement. As she left the room, the halls felt different, not brighter, not louder, just hers. Evelyn didn't walk faster or slower. She didn't turn to look back. But something had shifted deep in the walls, in the air, in the code. GeoAxis wasn't the same company anymore, because the person they'd fired wasn't just back. She now held the master key. What happens when your silence breaks with the whole world watching the lights dimmed at exactly 2:00 p.m.? Inside the sleek glass-paneled auditorium, over 100 investors sat in restless anticipation. The previous demo had left a scar. Today needed to erase it. Cameras blinked red from the back row, streaming live to defense agencies, infrastructure heads, and private capital firms across 3 continents. Behind the stage, the Nexora logo glowed faintly, overshadowed by one name now projected above it. Evelyn Hart, co-founder and chief systems architect. She stepped onto the stage with quiet purpose. No teleprompter, no over-rehearsed grin, just presence. "Thank you all for coming." She began, her voice clear and measured. "Today we'll run a live demonstration of OracleNet's predictive engine designed to anticipate seismic anomalies with accuracy and speed no other system has achieved." She gestured to the screen behind her. Real-time data pulsed across dozens of nodes, global sensors blinking in precise harmony. A subtle beep punctuated the rhythm. OracleNet was awake. Then, right on cue, alert minor tectonic shift, Ecuadorian ridge, estimated magnitude 3.9, no escalation expected. A ripple of murmurs. Phones lit up. Evelyn kept speaking. That alert arrived 7.2 seconds before the U.S. Geological Survey's system. Not only is it earlier, it's clearer, contextual, and embedded with a risk score adjusted by live learning models. The crowd leaned in. She didn't oversell it. She didn't need to. OracleNet was doing what it was built to do, and now it had an audience. In the front row, Damien sat stiffly, expression neutral, but his knee bounced with restrained energy. On either side of him, the board members wore the careful look of executives hoping the storm had passed, forgetting who had once caused it. As the system predicted, another tremor off the coast of Taiwan, with precise timestamp depth reading and risk classification, Evelyn paused. "This is what happens," she said softly, when engineers are trusted. Not managed, not mined, trusted. The applause came slowly, then built genuine and loud. Evelyn nodded once and stepped back. The moment wasn't just about code, it was about clarity. About being heard after being silenced. And in that packed auditorium, for the first time in years, Evelyn Hart wasn't defending her brilliance. She was leading with it, and no one, not a director, not a contract, not a board, was ever going to take that from her again. What happens when your quiet reply becomes the loudest voice in the room? 3 days after the OracleNet demo, Evelyn sat alone in her new office glass walls, clean lines, silence punctuated only by the hum of her encrypted terminal. The world outside was still catching up. Tech publications called it the comeback of the decade. Investors were doubling their stakes, and Evelyn's inbox overflowed with keynote invitations, collaboration requests, and job offers she didn't need. But none of that was why she opened her laptop that morning. Buried between policy memos and analytics reports was a single unmarked thread. Subject clarification request from Damian Cole to Evelyn Hart. It was short. Too short. Legal would like to revisit certain aspects of the IP clause. Can we meet? No apology. No acknowledgement. Just the same old script dressed in new desperation. Evelyn stared at it for a full minute before typing exactly 13 words in response. The time to negotiate passed the moment you underestimated me. Request denied. She hit send. That email would leak within 12 hours. Nobody knew who shared it, maybe an assistant, maybe someone on the board, but by midnight it had gone viral. Screenshots spread across tech forums, women in STEM circles, and think pieces titled, "She Built It." Then she locked it. The 13 words that ended a power grab, not a saboteur. A safeguard. Evelyn didn't issue a statement. She didn't need to. Her silence had become symbolic. Her restraint legendary. What Damian didn't understand, and maybe never would, was this: Evelyn hadn't fought for revenge. She had fought for sovereignty. For every time she'd been talked over in a lab meeting, for every time a man rephrased her idea louder and got the credit, for every "are you sure" email disguised as concern, and for every genius woman forced to explain herself twice as much for half as much ground. Now across the very platforms that once ignored her, people were quoting her back to herself. Build what matters. Protect it like it's already under attack. And she meant every word, because power taken is temporary, but power earned and protected becomes legacy. And Evelyn Hart had just rewritten the blueprint of what that legacy could look like. What if the spotlight they took from you ends up shining brighter than ever on your terms? The ballroom shimmered with soft gold light. It was the annual Global Impact in Science and Ethics Gala, an event Evelyn had attended once before years ago as an anonymous +1. Tonight, her name was on the banner. Her face was on the program. Her company, the one she founded after the Geo-Axis fallout, was now a global leader in predictive emergency systems. But tonight wasn't about OracleNet. It wasn't even about Evelyn's rise. It was about what comes next. She stood backstage in a tailored midnight blue blazer, holding the final copy of her speech. The murmurs beyond the curtain grew louder. Diplomats, investors, educators, young scientists, all gathered not to hear about code, but about courage. "Dr. Hart," a voice whispered, "you're up in one." She took a breath, stepped forward. On stage, the applause washed over her, not for revenge, not even for the victory, but for how she got there. She smiled and began. 3 years ago, I was told I didn't fit into the long-term vision of a company I helped build. I was terminated with a coffee and a contract, but what they didn't know is that I had already written my own. The audience was still. Eyes locked on her. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. I'm not here to rehash betrayal or celebrate retaliation. I'm here to talk about responsibility, not just what we build, but how we protect what we build. Not from outsiders, but from the insiders who smile while subtracting your worth behind closed doors. A low murmur of knowing swept the room. She scanned the crowd, pausing at the third row. Damian Cole was there, still in a tailored suit, still polished, but smaller now, somehow. He hadn't been invited, but she'd let him stay, because this time she controlled the access. I believe in progress, she continued, but I believe more in integrity, in giving credit, in writing your name on what you bleed for, and in making sure no one ever erases it again. Applause. Full. Roaring. As she stepped off stage, a young engineer approached her wide-eyed. "You made me believe I didn't have to shrink to fit," she said. Evelyn smiled softly. "That's the point. You never did." And just like that, the spotlight shifted again, this time onto the next voice. "When the world finally listens, What do you say with the silence you earned? Weeks after the gala, Evelyn sat in the top floor of her new headquarters in Geneva, floor-to-ceiling glass reflecting the snowy Alps. The room was quiet but not empty. Her latest project, Aurora, pulsed quietly on the monitor beside her, a next-gen predictive platform. This time not just for tectonic events, but for humanitarian crises, food shortages, power grid collapses, environmental tipping points. It didn't just detect risk, it anticipated neglect, built on principles she once had to fight for. A soft chime sounded an encrypted message from the UN. Another request to license her platform for emergency strategy. She would review it later. Right now, Evelyn was writing something else. Not code, not legal terms. A letter. To the next builder. If you're reading this, it means you've created something powerful enough for someone to try and take it. That means you've done something right. Now comes the real work. You must decide if you will share it and with whom. Not everyone who smiles wants to build beside you. Some only want the blueprint so they can erase your name from it. So document everything. Keep receipts. Encrypt what matters, and leave room for the possibility that one day you'll need to protect your own brilliance, even from those who once praised it. Build, share, but guard the root key. Yours in truth, Dr. Evelyn Hart. She printed the letter and slid it into a plain envelope marked only with a symbol, her initials embedded into a circuit path. A knock at the door. Ray, the young engineer from months ago, poked his head in. "Press is downstairs," he said. "They want a quote about the IPO." Evelyn stood slowly adjusting the sleeve of her black blazer, the same one from her first demo. She didn't carry the flash drive anymore. She didn't need to. OracleNet didn't just bear her name now, it bore her DNA. Every line of code had been rebuilt from scratch, not just as a safeguard against theft, but as a tribute to survival. She turned to Ray. "Let's tell them the truth." He raised an eyebrow. Which part? She smiled. That we didn't build the system to make headlines. We built it so people could never ignore the warning signs again. And with that, she stepped into the light not to reclaim power, but to redefine what power could be.